First of all, let me thank Amadou Diallo and his trio for the introduction and the wonderful music. And we will hear more from him later. It's not going to rain. Not going to rain. I'm Bill Connors. How do you do? Let me welcome you to Port Ewan. If you're not a native son of Port Ewan, welcome you to Port Ewan and to this event, the Sojourner Truth Memorial Park. And will you please stand and recite with Elliot Auerbach, the Ulster County Controller, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Yeah.
I want some help with me, if you don't mind. Come on up, Elizabeth and Sophia. I brought some help with me, if you don't mind. Will you turn and we could pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. Thank you. We just recited 31 words with a powerful message, but it is the last 11 that resonate to a 13-year-old Sojourner Truth as her life evolved from slave child to free woman. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have come a long way, and we have a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Auerbach. Up and away. Okay. I am Bill Connors. Still, we've come to celebrate a slave, an African-American woman, Isabella, who stood up in this town to claim her freedom, to claim her person. Our gathering today is an acknowledgement of her bondage, but more importantly, it is a celebration of her strength and conviction and indomitable courage. It's fitting today, it seems to me, 2 centuries later, that 3 honored women rise to honor Isabella, who chose to become Sojourner Truth. The internationally known poet Bobby Katz, the award-winning CBS News commentator, writer, and actress Nancy Giles, and the extraordinary sculptor Trina Green. It's great to be proud. So many people and organizations have made this event possible. You'll see some of these people on the platform, but many have been partners all along the way. They are listed in your program, but I wish to recognize them, even if I have to do it quickly. So here they are. Mary Ahaway, Carlton Mabey, Michael Baglio, Anthony Mignoni, Joanne Steele, the Reverend James Beckelman, the Reverend G. Modelli Clark, the Reverend Jennifer Barrows, Diane McCord, Esopus Town Clerk, Nina Postupak, Ulster County Clerk, Rick Remsnyder of the Office of Ulster County Tourism, John Coutant, Supervisor of the Town of Esopus, Elliot Auerbach, Ulster County Controller, and Kevin Cahill, Assemblyman of the 103rd Assembly District of New York. The generosity of many offices has made this possible. The New York State Assembly, New York State Main Street Program, Church Communities Foundation, the Reformed Church of Port Ewan, King Family Foundation, the New York Community Trust, the Scenic Hudson, Mid-Hudson Valley Federal Credit Union, and many local businesses. KEM Landscaping, Kindly Signs, Widener Memorial, Stanford Levy, Fern Frank Sculpture House. And most important, the dedicated people who caused this to happen. The Sojourner Truth Esopus Memorial Committee, Tim Elred, 11 Clark, Corinne Nyquist, Mary Lou Lamping, and not least at all is our county historian, chair and committee chairperson, Ann Gordon. Please give them a special thanks, too, are due to Deborah Silvestro, whose idea of memorializing this site was hers. I don't know if Miss Silvestro is here. I guess perhaps she is not. But wherever you are, thank you. Now, it is my privilege to introduce John Coutant, Supervisor of the Town of Esopus, who will tell us how this statue came to be.
Thank you and good afternoon. You may ask, why is the town of Esopus honoring Isabella, a young slave girl of the 19th century, as the daughter of Esopus? She lived the first 30 years of her life as a child and woman here in Esopus, where they were filled with desperation and hard work. She had neither education nor church to guide her, and yet, if we judge her by the standards set by Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., it was not the color of her skin or the condition of her servitude, but the content of her character that set her apart and makes her worthy of our recognition today. She knew, even though a slave, that she deserved fair treatment from her master. And she knew, even though her enslaved family was split apart over and over, that she could count on the love and support from them. She knew, when freedom was near to her, that the laws and courts were there to help her and protect her. When in 1843, at age 46, she took a new name, Sojourner Truth, and began her life as a traveling speaker for the causes of abolition and human rights. She carried with her the strength of character that she developed here in the town of Esopus. We honor her for her humanity and courage, her knowledge and her wit, and for her resilient spirit of her life. Esopus, you should be proud. She was one of us. At this time, I'd like to recognize the people who worked for the last 5 years to make this project, to bring this project to life. The Sojourner Truth Working Committee. I know firsthand how many meetings they had, month after month, in our town hall. And I've got to flip a page. I know them almost by name, and let me go through them. Tim Aldred, faithful, serious, dedicated to doing a good job. Evelyn Clark, she was there as well. She got to be a fixture in town hall with them. Carolyn Nyquist, another enthusiastic person. Mary Lou Lamping, unbelievable. Strength, character. And above all, Ann Gordon, who did a fantastic job of chairing this committee to make this event happen today. Thanks go as well Thanks go as well to Diane McCord, Town Clerk, stewarding the state grant funding. You will see on your programs the list of donors and others that helped as well. It's a pleasure to stand here before you this afternoon, and I'm extremely proud of this town of Esopus, this movement today, and what we're celebrating. Another national recognition for the town of Esopus. Thank you.
Too much dancing before we started. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. I'm happy to introduce you now to one of our own, a Hudson Valley native, born and raised in Newburgh, New York, a resident of Port Ewan for now at least a dozen years, a prolific poet with more than 80 books for the young and for the not so young to her credit. Her work appears in many collections published throughout the world. Please welcome Bobby Katz.
Thank you so much. Becoming Sojourner. Imagine a little girl, Isabella, maybe 8, maybe 9, tall for her age, torn from her parents, sold with a flock of sheep for $100. Imagine a little girl who spoke Dutch, sold to a master who spoke English, who beat the little girl daily because she did not. Imagine the little girl a year later, grown taller, grown stronger, worth more, sold for $105. To be a slave for a tavern keeper in a river town called Port Ewan, to haul water and molasses, to pour rum, to do a grown-up's work. A tall girl for her age, but remember, she was still a little girl. Maybe 9, maybe 10. She worked hard, grew taller, grew stronger. After a year and a half, the tavern keeper sold her to John Dumont for $175. Slavery was to be outlawed in New York, but the girl, now a woman, a very tall woman, could wait no longer. With the fall harvest finished and all the sheared wool spun, she just walked off Dumont's land, walked off with her youngest child, still a baby, to find shelter with a kind family, Isaac and Maria von Wegeren. Months later, Isabella learned Peter, her 5-year-old son, had been sold south to an Alabama planter. She knew that she was tall, but now she felt tall within. In her words, I felt as if the power of a nation was with me. Certainly, New York law was on her side. The judge ruled that Peter be delivered to his mother. Oh, what head-to-toe scars and bruises Mother found on his young body. Imagine the spirit within that woman, once called Isabella, a woman with a unique gift of words who could neither read nor write, a woman tall inside and out, who talked with the Lord as with a friend, who took his advice, travel, sweet yet resolute, wise yet generous. Imagine a very tall woman who walked on earth, making it better. Imagine Sojourner Truth. Thank you.
Wesley with the steps up here. Thank you so much, Bobby. I want to take this opportunity to thank Assemblyman Kevin Cahill for his work to secure a New York State Capitol grant that funded this project. Assemblyman Cahill has a long history in the Hudson Valley. He's a graduate of SUNY New Paltz, of Albany Law School. He was an Ulster County legislator from 1986 to 1992. He served as assembly person from the 101st District, our district, of the New York State Assembly, State Legislature in 1993 and 94, and then as director of the Health Care Financing Administration. He was then re-elected to the Assembly in 1998. A resident of Kingston, he has actively represented us to the present time. Please welcome Kevin Cahill.
Now, two of these speakers made you all be very quiet so you could hear. John Coutant didn't do that. If you were sleeping in Ulster Park, you heard him. Hello, everybody. I was going to ask you to close your eyes and imagine young Isabella walking from River Road down to Slakesburg, making her way across the river, filling a pack on her back, and then making her way back. How many people parked as far away as River Road? That's a long walk. How many people parked down in Slatesburg? That's an even longer walk. Put about 40, 50, 60 pounds on your back. Make yourself a child. And that's what this little girl did every day from Scrivers Public House to make sure that there was enough rum to go around for the next day. That was one of the many things that she did in her young life. Her young life robbed entirely of a childhood. Entirely. Made to work. Punished, sometimes for no reason whatsoever. Treated like property. Now today, if we hear about a kid that's gone bad, we think about, maybe they had trouble as a kid. Maybe there was a problem back at home. When you think about what this girl endured, and you think about the woman she became, starting right here, not just here in Ulster County, here in Esopus, the woman she became. She was not only one of the foremost abolitionists before that term was even invented, she was also one of the first people in this country to stand up for the rights of women. She was not only an abolitionist and a feminist, she was also a skilled orator, someone who could get you rapt just by listening to her words. And she didn't have the benefit of a highfalutin education. She just had a giant heart, and she had a gift. And instead of taking that gift and sharing it just with her children and grandchildren, she reached out to society, maybe for the first time really seriously, in Kingston on the steps of the Ulster County Courthouse, where she practically begged people to help her complete the petition to free her son. And on that day, made history. So again, think about all she did here, and then think about all she stood for in this nation. There are so many places that want to say Sojourner Truth is from here. Battle Creek, Michigan, I don't know what the heck I was doing there. Sunday morning, nothing is open. I drive through the middle of town, gigantic statue of Sojourner Truth. All over the Midwest, you see references to Sojourner Truth. Our nation's capital has a bust of Sojourner Truth in it. Everybody wants to say, Sojourner Truth is our daughter. Sojourner Truth is our mother. Well, guess what? She's a child of Esopus. And ladies and gentlemen, I am just so grateful for all the people who have worked so hard over these last several years to make sure that we could have this moment. The place where the dumpy old town hall stood. I'm sorry if I offended anybody, particularly dump owners. We will now have a centerpiece for this great community. And I can't tell you enough how important it was that the folks who were making sure this happened never ever gave up and dreamed big. When I heard that it was coming to fruition, now in 2013, I tried to think what she was doing 5 years after the statue was conceived. And at that point, she was now a 16-year-old girl. And she was starting to enter adulthood. And she was starting to do those things that we all want to do in those years, to enter into adulthood. She started thinking about having a family. It's different than it is for you and me. And I'm sure in 1813, she still had memories of that long, long walk from River Road, down the path, all the way to Slatesburg, over to Kingston, and back again with a heavy, heavy pack on her back. So, if I could ask the committee to come over here and join me for a minute, this is one of the highlights of the day.
The artist.
Only a little taller than she is.
Thank you, Trina.
And my neighbors at Woodland Pond who made such a wonderful showing, and of course these wonderful people behind me. The life of a sculptor is very solitary and can be very lonely, and it's day after day hard work, and so my reward is seeing all of you faces here and being able to present to you somebody who's been so meaningfully a part of our Ulster County history. Thank you.
Bobby, stand by the statue. Honey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good, Bob.
Sorry.
I hope I got it, honey.
Yes. Very nice.
Good girl. Nice ball.
I will. Here she goes.
I can't exactly remember what I said, but I can remember what my heart felt. Number one, that I'm very honored to be here, and I'm so pleased to see my dear friends from Woodland Pond, who are just, raise your arms, let's see. Hey, here for Woodland Pond. And all these wonderful people behind me, and I mentioned the life of a sculptor is a lonely one. It's day after day of hard work in the studio. And so today my reward is seeing all of your wonderful faces, and I feel so honored in addition to being able to contribute to Ulster County history. The history of slavery here is very little known, but there probably more will be mentioned about that later. But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Trina. Congratulations. Congratulations. That lady is now the centerpiece of this wonderful town. Now, many of you know Nancy Giles. She's a frequent commentator on the CBS News Sunday morning, where she has appeared for about 10 years. Her observations and insights on our interests and our behavior and sometimes our odd genius are part of our Sunday morning conversations. Ms. Giles has toured with the Chicago Second City, has been awarded a Gracie with her co-host Erin Moriarty for their talk show G&M, has a theater award for Mayor, the off-Broadway musical, which she, just a little bit. But anyhow, and she's a visitor frequently to the Hudson Valley. Please welcome Nancy Giles.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. I have to say, I always get kind of embarrassed when people start to read, your bio. It's like it starts to get really long, and you start to realize, gee, I'm old. I'm very, very, very humbled and proud to be here, and just missed my mouth. Okay, good. All right, that's all right. And actually, after unveiling that gorgeous statue that Trina made, I feel like anything I would say is kind of superfluous because it's so beautiful, but I'm just going to make a few short remarks about how much I'm moved by this, and hopefully everybody will get a chance to just touch that beautiful statue. I think part of what really struck me about Sojourner Truth at that age is I thought about where I was as a 11, 12, 13-year-old as opposed to Isabella Baumfree, as she was known at the time. So I grew up in New York City, and all right, I don't fault my public school for this, but by the time I was around 11 or so, I was aware of slavery. You get your certain amount of schooling, but I never really knew that slavery existed in New York. I thought of it as purely a Southern thing. We learned things pretty cut and dry, that it was in the South, as I said. There was an Underground Railroad set up by Harriet Tubman. These are some key names and key things we learned. That some slaves were able to escape and come to the North to live as free people. We learned about the Civil War, the Dred Scott decision, where black people were pretty much told that they were 3/5 of a man, not a whole person. Lincoln freeing the slaves, the Emancipation Proclamation, Reconstruction, lynching, segregation, Brown versus the Board of Education, the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King, voting rights, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to slavery, other key names were Phyllis Wheatley, who was an incredible poet, Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner. So there were certain things that I did know about slavery, but I mostly believe that it was a Southern thing. So one of the things that I'm so amazed by and really touched by that Aesopus is deciding to really do this beautiful tribute to Sojourner Truth. Look at the two Girl Scouts over there posing with her. That's so sweet, you know? Is that there's a famous saying, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. And everyone in the country needs to know that slavery was in more places than the South, and that we can come here today and celebrate an incredible young person who was a slave and made their life here as a slave, and that this town can own that and not shirk from it and celebrate it in a way that they can. To me, that's the beauty of American history. That's what's so incredible about this country, is our kind of bizarre, twisted past, but how we take that and we move forward with it. So Isabel lived in Aesopus, and she walked along these roads, and she worked and dreamed as a slave. And the beautiful thing about this statue is it marks a moment in her daily existence. Now, here's more of that very unique American history, all woven into this young woman, whose parents were from Ghana and Guinea. They were bought and sold and brought to this country, bought by Dutch descendants. So the Dutch was her first language. All right, black girl speaking Dutch. Okay, I mean, it's not the same, but it's kind of like some of my friends who say that I don't sound black because I'm from Queens. I'm like, I'm from Queens. But no, in a deep way, you know, that was her first language. Now check this out. When she was sold and unfortunately beaten by a rather cruel slave owner named John Neely, the main reason she was beaten was because, as Dutch is her first language, she could not understand the commands that he and his wife gave her in English. She tried. She mentions that if they said bring a pot, sometimes she would bring, like, you know, a bowl of milk. She didn't know what they were saying, and he was so angry that he tied her hands in front of her and beat at her with a heated rod. And those are the marks that are on her back, which I encourage you, when you go and look at the statue, to just touch and feel those grooves. So this is a woman who came here as property. She didn't feel like property. We were property. Black people who are the descendants of slaves, the slaves were property. It's the one thing about this country that makes our group unique from all other immigrant groups, which reminds me of how the United States is always described as a nation of immigrants, but I've always felt that's only part of the story. We're a nation of ancestors of genocide victims, Native Americans. We're a nation of ancestors of kidnap victims, African Americans. And the whole theory about the melting pot, I never appreciated that, because I felt like people all over the world, the thought was they come to this country and they melded together into some new American stew. Okay, it was great that we supposedly shared one language. That's wonderful, but I never liked the idea of a melting pot. I think it's our differences and how we butt heads with those differences and how we deal with those differences that make this country unique. We're not a melting pot, in my opinion. We're more like a great salad with different flavors and textures that taste incredible together, all in the same big bowl. That's how I look at it. So back to Sojourner Truth. She's got this incredible, unique history, and she learned English as a second language and then went on to become one of the most famous orators of all time. Pretty incredible, right? So I look at her, Isabel, and I think of myself and where I was when I was about 11, 13. As I said, I was learning about slavery, but in a very general way. I was goofing around those years, wondering maybe where I'd go to high school. I was hooked on all my children. I wanted to get working papers as fast as I could so I could get a part-time job at Alexander's in Rego Park. I was experimenting with eyeliner. You know, I had no real worries. I had a public school education. I had an intact family. We lived in a house. I think we had a color TV. I mean, we had a good life. Isabella, however, at that same age, had scars, deep scars, visible grooves in her back. Despite that, she was determined. Another thing I love about the statue is she's gracefully moving forward. She's not standing in that space of being a victim of her slaveholder. She's moving forward. She's carrying those scars, but moving forward. And she was formed by her time in Aesopus. I mean, it's possible that her time after she left that evil slaveholder helped her heal from those scars. Still a slave, but at least treated with a bit more respect and regard, and not abused as she had been in the past. So you can touch that statue and feel her hair, you know, and her dress and the deep grooves in her back, and look at her posture that's so proud and leaning forward, that new expression we've been hearing a lot of. Another thing I love about her is that she became, after her growing up in this town, a pioneer for both civil rights and women's rights. Because in ways, those two groups did not really merge. Civil rights at the time seemed to be more for black male slaves, and the men that were being discriminated against. And women's rights seemed more to cover white suffragettes. She sort of threw down the gauntlet of how those two causes can intersect. It's called a messy intersection, according to Professor Kahil Gibran Muhammad, who directs the Schomburg Center in New York City. I love that. And actually, she took those feelings and put them into that incredible speech she did as an adult, Ain't I a Woman, at a women's conference, because she felt at the time that the women at the conference were understanding their own plight, but not applying it to where black women fed into the whole equation. And this is a woman, again, a daughter of Aesopus, who had the nerve to challenge the legality of her son being sold into slavery and won the case. Won the case. Amazing, right? I mean, everyone here knows that sometimes legal cases that seem to be cut and dry, that seem to be just, don't go the way we think they should go. This woman did it then, was not afraid to fight. After that is when she changed her name to Sojourner Truth and became a preacher for civil and women's rights, as I said. She also recruited troops for the Union Army. She met President Lincoln. I mean, she was a rock star in her way. And Aesopus should be really proud of the foundation that they offered her. She had a better life finally here than she did while she was in the care of John Neely. And in closing, I want to say, just being here and seeing this crowd of people is really emotional for me, because growing up in New York City, I'm used to diversity, and I've seen all kinds of people my entire life. And we have our own sort of short-sighted notion of small town America and how it is, and it's sometimes not so nice, okay, I'll admit it. But to look around and see the people in this community, to see the diversity in age, in race, in background, class, and that you're all here celebrating this black woman who was a daughter here, who started out in not necessarily the best ways. It's very touching to me, because we're living in a time where it feels like the country is splitting apart more than it's coming together. And that you are here, and that you're celebrating her, is a very American thing to do. To me, this is an embrace of true American history. And I, for one, am very, very grateful and humbled by it. I thank everyone that's here. I think that as an African American, and the African Americans in the audience, I feel an incredible source of pride seeing Sojourner Truth there. And I'm proud to see the rest of you as Americans taking on that pride too, because I think this is the only way we're going to go forward, is to understand our history, good and bad, embrace and own our history, good and bad, and then move forward. It's something that really frustrates me when people talk about, I do talk about politics occasionally, and I'll constantly get the, you know, when are black people gonna get over slavery? They need to get over it. It's done, put it behind you. You know, okay, but it's an important thing to know that we're the only group that came here as property. It's kind of a big thing. And to go forward with that, and for you all to go forward with that and know it and understand it and own it and know that there were slaves here. And here's one of the most famous ones who took her background and went forward, and that in your way, you were able to offer her some sort of a support system. I dig that. So, thank you, Esopus. Thank you for this and for being a real American town. Thank you.
That I can comment that would top that. I thank you very much for that wonderful talk. Our time is up. Mr. Amadou Diallo and his drummers will play for us for a while we disperse. Thank you so very much for coming. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of Esopus. Be proud of Sojourner Truth. Thank you.